Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by Eccentric, the makers of the K-Box and the new K-Pulley. Guys, flywheel training's really grown in popularity of late, and although it's something that's been around for a while, the simple reason that it's grown in popularity is because it works. We've been lucky to have a K-Box in our weight room for the past 3 years, and we've seen some really great things when it comes to improving the athlete's ability to change direction, and then looking at our return to play protocols with different lower body injuries with the student athletes. The love-hate relationship that everyone has with the K-Box is now just going to grow more with the addition of the K-Pulley. The ability to do standing presses, pulls, rip-throughs, and knee drive exercises is just going to be another arsenal to our training and another addition to the love-hate relationship that our student athletes have with the awesome tools that come from Eccentric. Go ahead and hop over to eccentric.com today to check out what they have. Guys, I can't recommend it enough, and I guarantee you won't be disappointed, not just with the products, but with the awesome customer service that Eccentric provides. Hey everybody, if you enjoy the podcast and the content that it provides, make sure you hop over and check out the all-new Strength Coach Network. The Strength Coach Network is a combination of the CVA SPS community and the Rugby Strength Coach community, bringing you what is sure to be the internet's leading resource for continuing education for strength and conditioning professionals. Combining these two resources has allowed us to bring some of the best content from some of the best minds in the world together for your one-stop shop to better improve the continuing education for not just yourself, but your entire staff. Bringing together all of the lectures from the Rugby Strength Coach community, along with the lectures exclusively done for the Central Virginia Sport Performance community, and all the lectures performed at the Central Virginia Sport Performance Seminar, make this an absolute must for performance coaches around the world. The world-class lectures at the Strength Coach Network are not all that you'll see as well. The discussion in the forums and the support and the career guidance from some of the top practitioners in the world, from people all over the world, makes this an absolute must and a great place for you to network, learn, and grow as a performance professional. So hop on over to strengthcoachnetwork.com and use the code CVASPS, that's C-V-A-S-P-S, to get your 48-hour trial for only $1. We're sure you're going to find great value in the Strength Coach Network and are really excited to have you involved. So hop on over to strengthcoachnetwork.com and use the code CVASPS to check it out today. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. Today, guys, I have the absolute pleasure of sitting down and talking training, coaching, and our role in the profession with Jeff Nichols. Guys, this is an absolutely sensational talk where Jeff's going to get into talking about how he connects emotionally and psychologically with his athletes, how he's built his network and the people that he refers out to. And then we get into our role as coaches, both with the athletes and sharing information and using social media in a positive manner. Guys, this is truly an awesome talk. And the only thing that we ask is if you do enjoy it, please screenshot it, share it on your IG, your Instagram story, pass it to somebody on Twitter, because the word of mouth is actually our oxygen, and we're just trying to get the best information out there that we can. So if you enjoy it, share away. But guys, I think this talk was super. This is really an awesome talk. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Let's get right to it. Jeff, thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
It is my pleasure, for sure.
Hey, man. So really excited about this one. Just building off the talk we were just having off camera, but for like the 3/4 of a human being that doesn't know who Jeff is, could you just give them the Spark Notes intro version of who you are, where you're at, and how you got where you are?
Yeah, again, just being a strength coach, like so many of us, we're former athletes. I was a former athlete in college, Troy University, played baseball there, and I picked up training as a kid just because I was a small child. Again, stereotype was come alive, and I've overcompensated, as you can all tell probably if you know me, with the tattoos and so forth. But all in good fun. So I grew up in a small town, fell in love with baseball, went to the South to play baseball. I equally fell in love with training because I felt like, because I was undersized, that was the one conduit that I could educate myself on to maybe either get an advantage based off of my size, and then knowing that I would eventually grow, because my father wasn't a small guy at all. But I knew I would grow, and once I grew, it's one of the decisions of my life that I really am proud of, or happy that I did, to just, hey, get into training and fall in love with it and learn, and it helped. And then, after my time in sports, I spent 11 years in the Navy, and getting to experience my time in the Navy as an exercise physiologist, getting to see from that perspective, from the job that I had in the Navy was really, really a great point of education because the physical demands were so high and there was a lot of common thread between the military world and sport. Now, there's a fair amount of differences, but in terms of physiology and those sort of things and those practical baseline, or the basics, they still apply, and even the advanced stuff applies. But it's a really cool perspective now because of my time in the military, and then now I've been out for, this is my 5th year, going into my 6th year. I've been out of service, going back and working with the military and law enforcement and the firefighters and other civil servants, and I do have a couple professional athletes, and fortunately I'm in a place to kind of pick and choose. But for me, my heart's in the tactical space because obviously I'm familiar with it, with the years that I spent in. But I guess even just the physical familiarity with it, the big thing is the emotional familiarity I have with the training and the people involved, and that's allowed me to develop a better connection than I thought possible at this point. So I'm really happy with what I'm doing, working with the military and law enforcement, some pro athletes, but I feel like I'm a decent educator, and that's kind of where I put my heart in. Like I don't try to motivate, I just try to educate.
Well, and you do a lot of that too with coaches through Instagram and things of that nature as well.
Right, and a lot of that stuff too is like, it's like I don't want to be a public figure in that regard now, but that would be stupid for me to just keep drawing that line in the stand. Like I consider myself a teacher that has a really unique following, I guess, and I just try to do my best to give them the truth that I know.
Now, I think a pretty interesting rabbit hole to run down because a lot of people don't understand this on the outside is you mentioned the emotional connection when it comes to what you have with the armed forces and the civil servants that you work with. Let's talk about that for a little bit because I think that, with Brett's book and conscious coaching and buying and all
Yeah.
those things
Oh,
being really neat to talk about now, this is an avenue that would be really unique to most coaches.
no, and that's the thing is like, and this is all I can talk really about is like, I certainly am familiar with Brett Bartholomew and the great things he's done as a coach, and I think as coaches we all got to kind of pick an avenue, and then we push really hard in that avenue based on probably a couple things. One of them is definitely passion. The other one should certainly be knowledge, and hopefully we can add some experience to that as time goes on. So those are 3 things that I look at for myself, and I go, well, I'm really passionate about certain things. I'm knowledgeable about certain things, but the things that I'm emotionally invested in right now, I need to learn a lot more about. And so, when it comes to the emotional quotient or like the real, like, so the clinical definition is resiliency. Like that's what the clinical world is going to talk about. And so that's, since I'm not a professional in the clinical world, granted, I can kind of scratch the top of the surface about motivation, those sort of things. But at the end of the day, we're at a point in life now where I shouldn't be talking specifics about the emotional state of an athlete or how to conjure that. That has to come from an experienced person in that clinical field. And now I'm not saying we can't, like as coaches, we can't get our guys up to that 80-85% of what we have to offer. Don't mistake me as saying we shouldn't be emotionally driving these people based off of what we know. But at some point we get to a point, again, I have my limits in terms of dietetic guidance. When I reach that limit, I hand off to our professional. And the same thing, it's like I'm trying to push that envelope as I'm learning on that resiliency side. And then when I get to that point where it's like I've encountered the last step that I'm comfortable working with in that individual, I have to hand that off to somebody else. And that's, Dr. John Sullivan or Chris Johnson and guys that I know in that clinical sports psychology field that have been working in it for over a decade or 2 decades. Like those are the real scientists that understand that emotional, that piece that us coaches, because I look at it like this, and this is probably I should have just summarized it with this. Like, imagine your personal relationships in life that failed. Okay, and I'm not trying to bring up bad news. It's just one of those things that we're not talking about a 20-year marriage. We're talking about, we're in our college days and we're dating people and that sort of stuff. But when that relationship ends, it's incredibly apparent most of the time where we went wrong. Those red flags when we're in the mix, because we're emotionally tied to that relationship, a lot of times we don't see. And that's what a lot of times it happens to us coaches. And I've been guilty of it more years than I've been coaching than I'm currently saying I'm on the right path. My point is that we have got to, as professionals, hand this off at some point. And we have got to include these people, because then it makes us as coaches much, much better. I'm going to make the introduction because I understand the emotional side to some degree in the tactical space. And then I'm the conduit to make that introduction to somebody who may not have that relationship. Like, I'm going to introduce my tactical folks to John Sullivan, because he's the person that needs to go from 80 to 100% with these athletes. So hopefully that is where that was a reasonable answer.
No, 100%. And this is just driving right down back to something we were talking about earlier, and I was really hoping it would lead to this. Passing off. Something that's so hard for us to do in quotes,
Yeah,
because there's so much like fear and paranoia almost in coaches that, like, well, if I don't do everything, then I don't, I could lose my job or whatever.
for sure.
But I think that finding people that are the superstars and putting them on your team is exponentially important.
Yes.
So my
I
question to you for that, though, is how do you identify these people, and how do you drive those relationships forward?
Yeah, and again, I can speak from my experience, and I will say this, that I've made, especially in the last, because I used to be, I was a co-owner of a training facility here in Virginia Beach. It's an amazing one with amazing people, and in my mentality, a lot of times that coaching is, and so this is my kind of story of life and where I kind of screwed it up. I didn't value the things as a coach that I value so much now. And so it's like, how do you build this team? Because, a team was, we were trying to do a good job of building a team and at that place. And I was the weak link for a lot of reasons, especially on the emotional standpoint. So, like, point is now that I've gotten out and I've gotten separation and seen the mistakes I've made as a coach, the answer to that for me is you have to get to know people. In the best way for me, like, the thing is, like, I wasn't really getting to know people professionally because I was afraid of being vulnerable and saying, well, hey, I have let's call it, I have knowledge gaps, right? In your field of dietetics, we'll say a person's field of dietetics. So I might have some knowledge gaps, right? I have a son and not a daughter. So I may have some knowledge gaps of how to work with a young girl. And so I have to learn how to improve upon those knowledge gaps. And that was the one thing I didn't do well. And so for me, getting to know somebody and saying, hey, this is who I am, and this is my knowledge, and this is where I'm comfortable. Like, beyond this, I don't want to talk about this stuff, right? And it's okay to say that. And so a lot of those beyond this, I don't want to talk about that, I'm getting into, the athletic training world, the PT world, the PA world, the position assistant, something outside my scope of practice. Because again, our scope of practice is to minimize as much non-contact related injury as possible, and then ancillary stuff associated with that. So for me, it's like I'm going to constantly interview, and it's a weird thing, because here's the answer: because of my own personal inefficiencies over the last years of coaching, the things I'm trying to fix. If I see those things in people, then I know I don't want to be a part of it. It sounds like a terrible point of judgment, but I look at it and I go, that was me, 5 years ago, the arrogant, ego-driven strength coach, right? And now that doesn't work well for a team. And so the folks that I've surrounded myself with now, I'm able to get to know them and say, hey, listen, I don't know what I'm doing here. I need your help. And they go, okay, cool. I know what I'm doing there. You keep doing that, because that's not my field. So I'm trying to find professionals that will go, yep, I really know what I'm talking about. I'll put money on it, or I'll put my reputation on it. But when we're talking about what you're doing, I didn't want to hear. I can give input and guidance, but I'm not the one that's going to be writing programs. So that's a long answer to a short question of, like, I have to audit people based off of the bad decisions that I made as a coach. That's how I do it.
Awesome. Fantastic. So then let's keep moving forward. And how does that affect your relationship with the athletes and the people you're working with when they see that you're willing to do that?
Yeah, and it's interesting because now the only demographic I haven't been able to try that on is young kids on the mass, because at my former business, it was a lot of younger athletes, and so that deep well of empathy that needs to exist with around young kids. I mean, I had not developed that, and it's something I struggle with. It's not that I don't like kids. Believe me, I love kids, especially my own, but it's like I have these extremely high expectations because I remember myself at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I was so incredibly driven. Like it was truly obsessive, truthfully obsessive compulsive as a child. So I have a hard time stepping back and going, why don't you appreciate this? Why aren't you working hard? Why aren't you moving right? Because I literally would have given my pinkies at 12 years old to have a strength coach me. And I mean that. So I came from this extremely self-deprecating, ultimately focused world for whatever reason. I didn't get it from my parents. Like, my parents worked their ass off, but I'm not sure where I got it from. Point is that trying to now step back and learn some of those things that I didn't learn before has made me a much better coach. And what I'm really, really trying to do is get outside my comfort zone and coach people that teach me these things. And that's also what comes with that, is talking with folks like you and other professionals for me to go, hey man, if I'm talking to a dietitian, for example, and I'm trying to give input, and they know like the input I'm giving in is phony, and I kind of know it too, that's a really bad place to be. I don't want to be up there giving a dietetics brief when I know I have a dietitian here. So we have to be okay as strength coaches to understand our limitations, because when we do that, we don't spend time kind of knowing stuff. We don't want to be a mile wide and an inch deep. I want to be a quarter mile wide and 2 miles deep in my profession. And so I think in the interest of us saying, well, I don't want to be exposed as vulnerable, the only reason you're going to be exposed as vulnerable if you get outside your lane. And so I have decided, I've tried my best to not get in the lane of motivation. I don't get into the lane of mental toughness. I don't get into the lane of this interesting Navy SEAL never quit world. I don't, that's not my world. I'm not a Navy SEAL anymore. I don't do those things. There's no value for me in that world. So that's, again, a very long answer, short question.
No, but an absolutely stellar answer. So then, how do you recommend for coaches, based on how you've seen this evolve, to handle these situations when it comes to finding and selecting their network, if you may?
Yeah. Yeah. And that was, so it's funny. I years ago, when we decided to open up the facility, the first I got some really great advice, and we listened to it. We got some great advice. We listened to it, and then I kind of just fell off. So like, my point is so the way I hear that question is like, hey, as a strength coach, what do you want to do in life? Like, do you want to work in divisional athletics? Do you want to work in pro athletics? Do you want to be private? Like, what do we want to do? Like, that's the question as a strength coach. Like, where do we want to work? Once we find that place where we're passionate about, want to work, then we have to understand, like, okay, this lane has very particular needs that are different in other lanes. So, I guess the simple answer to that is, I do my best to make sure that as I'm trying to build rapport and build programming, the same thing is, I am very likely, especially if I'm a young strength coach, it's more likely that I'm running something I truly don't know. So that's why a young strength coach asks. I don't look at like old strength coaches as this anymore, like guys at 10, 15, 20, like I'm at 19 years. Those are the first people I expect to ask questions that they don't know. That's where I've gotten to. Now, there's a lot of strength coaches that don't need to ask a lot of questions, but because there's so much data collection possibilities, technology, all these just things there's such a great time right now for us strength coaches to learn. Don't pretend you know something, even if you know about it. And that was something I was really guilty about. And I did that in the tech world for a long time, is I got a basic understanding of so much stuff that to me, it just kind of all ran together. And then you're really not giving value. So that's my point. I guess my answer is that when you run into problems, especially as an old strength coach, especially now, because there's so many good, smart people out there. As an old strength coach, find a young strength coach, find a young dietitian that's hungry. And that's some of my favorite people to work with, is guys like a Hunter Chernosky in Michigan. Like that guy, he's a young strength coach, but he is crazy smart and crazy motivated. And for me as an older strength coach, I look at that and go, I want to be around that. That's not intimidating to me. That's value added. And that's the one thing that I appreciate most now about in the position we're in, because we can appreciate our young strength coaches in a way that we never have been able to. Why? Because we can see them work. We have so much social media and so much electronic media that we can get a good look at a strength coach before we even work with them. So make sure that, like, encourage these young strength coaches for sure.
I love it. And this is awesome. Awesome shout out for Hunter. He's going to love that. Because he's a super cat and he's doing awesome stuff up there.
He's fantastic. Absolutely. And that's, I find a lot of joy now in being happy for these folks. Like, again, I have been a pain in the ass for a long time, and I still tend to be, in terms of my aggressive nature and just I have a pretty big mouth. But it's getting to the point now where I'm deciding to say, hey, you know what? I'd rather take somebody, not even under my wing, but just get part of their life and learn something and give everything I possibly can to this person. Because at the end of the day, I'm only in the position as a coach because of the coaches before me who cared enough about me, who shared enough of their time and knowledge with me. Like, I've had some really, really amazing coaches, like Mark Stevenson is just amazing. Richard Shaughnessy, who's still at Troy, and Cal Dietz, and so many people, like Bert Soren, they've just, for whatever reason, have taken me under, as an equal or a peer or a mentor, and just gone like, hey, I appreciate having you around. And that's something for me that's given me a lot of joy.
Yeah, Mark actually is probably one of the 3 coaches that I've met where I've actually been starstruck when I met him.
Yep. He's one of the brightest people I've ever met.
Oh my gosh.
Mark's only problem is this. He's got so much information that he has cataloged in his head, like under knowledge, not under just, hey, I've read it. He is the ultimate person. You go, hey, Mark, what should I do here? And he kind of looks at you and he's like, it depends. Because it's just so deep. And that's kind of where I get, because the one thing, like, there's many things. Richard Shaughnessy taught me better than anyone. I've never seen anyone manage a weight room like him. Never. I've never seen a strength coach eloquently manage a weight room the way Richard Shaughnessy does. And I have never, ever, ever seen a coach be a better critical thinker than Mark Stevenson. I've never seen that before. And that's the one thing those are the 2 things that as a strength coach that I got taught young and early, I guess. Well, Mark was a bit later on, but I remember being at the TSAC. I presented at a number of TSACs. It was like my second time a couple years ago in San Diego, and I got on a bit of a soapbox like I do in my presentation. And afterwards, I talked to Mark, and he's like, "Hey, man, it was great. It's exactly what I needed." And it still remind myself. He goes, "Hey, you need to be really careful about speaking in absolutes, like saying always and never." And it comes to this, like, you need to become more of a critical presenter and thinker. And he said that straight to me, and I was like, "You're right. You are 100." It took me, I'll be honest, it took me a year or two to kind of like bite my ego back a bit, but he was 100% right. And I appreciate him so much for that.
Yeah, he's the top 1%, that's for sure.
Without a doubt. Yeah. And so if anyone knows that Mark Stevenson is director of sports science for the Eagle, that's Sean Halls,
yeah,
for the Lions now, for the Detroit Lions.
Oddly enough, both with TSAC backgrounds though.
Perfect. Yeah. Say Sean. So Sean with the Eagles, brilliant brilliant young strength coach. I say young, he's not a child, but I think Sean might only be like, shoot, like 34, something like that.
That sounds right.
Yeah, he's in his young 30s because when he went with, I think he had like just turned 30 his first year with the Eagles, and that was what, 4 years ago, something like that. So, anyways, big shout out to Sean because that guy, he is as bright as they come as well, and that's what I mean. So, like, I look at what Mark has done and Sean and all these guys, and I go, yeah, they certainly have great teachers, great teachers. It's just what they've done with that knowledge to respect the knowledge that's been offered to them is such a one. And it's like, look at Ron McKeefery too. It's like one of the coolest things I know about Ron is that he was the first one to publish saying, hey, we want to know the knowledge, but we also can be of more value. And he was one of the first guys like, don't spread yourself thin. Here's other things to look at, right? Let's look at and how to manage and master social media and certain other things, but don't spread yourself thin. And that was something that I learned the hard way too.
Yeah, and Mac he's done a lot to help me as well. And I think that as we just keep rolling through people and connections that we have, I guess it's just back to the social media thing that you brought up before. Like, your social network now, and your network is really your net worth.
Yeah, I never is not the right word. I didn't anticipate having a social media following like I do, number one. Number two, having a social media following that is engaged, not only just on what I say, but what's really cool, I think this is one of the litmus tests I think I found that I've social media is kind of like a silver lining. One of the things I'm not a begrudging social media at all. I just think that the way I choose to use it. One of the cool things I've seen is that now I've had a social media, I've had an Instagram now for about 3 years, something like that, give or take. But one of the really cool things is now as I read through my comments, I don't respond too much anymore. I do some to the people I know, I definitely do, but a lot of the people that have been following and listening to me and supporting what I do, that a lot of those folks are the ones that leave comments. Like, they answer a lot of the questions for me. And I think that that's really cool because you see an impact and you see people paying it forward. And the phrase that my entire business and reputation that I'm trying to live for basically comes off of two things. I very much believe in purpose, process, and love. Like, that's a huge thing for me. And then, like, again, for lack of a cliche, sort of, or forgive the cliche, is leave it better than you found it. Like, that drives me. That drives me every day, every time. Now, I make plenty of mistakes, but for me, that's always been the contribution that I think that we are in a profession right now because of the ability to grow the knowledge. We are in a profession as strength coaches to do just that. It's not to say that the evolution of skill set in basketball and football and weightlifting isn't going to continue to get better or even evolve. But we as a collective society of strength coaches, physiologists, and strength professionals, if we want to call it that, we have enough people to train all collectively that we don't need to kind of like soup bowl it and go, these are my athletes. And that's one of the really cool things I learned from Bo Sandoval, who's at the UFC, right? What an amazing human and coach he is. He just says, hey, and it's a bad habit of mine too. And it's something I say, it's a perceptional bad habit of mine. And it's something I'm trying to change for me, not a point of judgment. Bo never refers to his athletes as my, right? He refers to them athletes I've been fortunate enough to work with. And that's something that I've really tried to change my own personal mindset on, is that I don't have any ownership over anyone's success, but to be a part of the guidance that may be necessary to navigate the pitfalls of training, good and bad, that's what I want to be a part of. And just trying to change your vernacular a little bit tends to change your mindset. And for me, that's the best way to do that, is communicate with people. Again, taking it right out of Dr. Jordan Peterson, who's just brilliant. It's just be precise with your language. And when you're precise with your language, you don't lie. When you don't lie, you build bridges, right? We don't exaggerate. We don't do those things. And And in a world where it's just a lot of strong, ego-driven dudes, we tend to exaggerate our knowledge and our competence. And I've done that for years, and I'm just not doing that anymore. And ironically enough, people are perceptive of that, and that I very much appreciate, for people to be able to see that I'm trying to the best of my ability to deliver facts.
Well, and that's the best we can do, right? Is the best we can do, and be honest and forthcoming with the effort and the information we're providing.
Agreed. Yep. Yeah. So I definitely feel that we are all in this profession in probably the most ideal time, because we have a lot of people that care. We have a lot of athletes that care and want a great service. We have an opportunity to share this information with other people too. And again, if I feel nowadays, I'm realizing this, if I share a video or a statement or something on social media that I know is like, man, this really helped me out. This was really beneficial to an athlete that I've been working with or something. And you broadcast that. And, let's say like I've got 20,000 something or whatever, but the reality is that if you can impact 100 people in a way that's like, oh, they may not use it directly, but then they share that with somebody. A lot of times we as coaches and teachers, especially teachers, and I got this from my father, in a very morbid way, and I don't mean to be. When he passed away, my father grew up on a dirt road in eastern Iowa, like literally, like, kind of like me, but even more remote. And the town I grew up in was less than 100 people, give or take. And the town that I went to school in was about 3,500 people. Not a big town. When my father passed away, there were 600 people at his funeral. Like, leave a legacy based on how you communicate with people. And that's what my father did. My father was an eloquent communicator, that was a great listener, that didn't have time for people that didn't care for others. And I didn't see that until late. It's funny, like my father was incredibly wise, but I was too arrogant and egotistical to notice it. And I resented him a little bit of that for that. Not a lot. I love my father. But there's a bit of that sort of juvenile resentment that existed. And I had this, you have this, a lot of strength coaches have the same thing. Like, full disclosure, like, there's that little bit of egotistical resentment that I had against Mark Stevenson and all these people. It's just like, well, fuck, let me do my own thing. And I realized, I go, whoa. That is going to get you nowhere fast. And it did. And when I really not only just believed my own, like, inadequacies, that they were real, when I finally stopped doing it, I was like, wow, man, I'm building relationships. I'm getting the message through. And then it's a very counterintuitive thing. It's like, I want to jam my message through out of like aggression. And now that I realize, like, my message gets received far better if I'm willing to teach rather than force. And that's kind of been the nature of strength coaches in a good way, like, because we see that very aggressive, amazing, because of the moment in the weight room. Like, we got to get it loud, we got to get the energy up, and that's really appropriate for that moment. You know what I mean? And I would take that sort of aggression, because that's what I learned, and put that into all of my coaching sometimes, like in terms of that do it now mentality. And it doesn't work for everyone. That everyone has different carrots. And so that's, for me, is trying to discover that carrot for people. I enjoy that.
Yes, 100%. And I think that story that you just shared with us, super powerful, and like a fantastic spot to leave this at, Jeff. I cannot thank you enough for spending the time and being so open and candid, and not just sharing today with us, but with, all the IG live talks you do, and really never being a guy to hold a punch. I can't thank you enough for helping us all be better day in and day out, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Like, again, I'm easy to reach. Again, especially just find me. I know whatever you guys need any questions. I typically read most stuff, but I'm really thankful that I have the opportunity, truthfully, to be able to be in this position to help what's going to turn out to be the amazing men and women that we are all a part of, whether it's in the athletic world or especially in the tactical space. Those young men and women that we don't know, kind of like my father, we don't know what impact we've made on this world, not even really till we're dead. I know that's not the morbidity side of it, but like, if I'm able to continue to hopefully be blessed to do this for another 20 years, that impact is what I'm most looking forward to, is really, really paying that one forward and letting people know it's like when you share information, it doesn't discredit or devalue you. And that's where I'd like to leave this, is share the information you have, because people will truly appreciate that. It's not yours to keep, it's yours to share.
Cheers, my friend. Thank you so much.
My brother, be
Yeah,
well.
you too. We'll be in touch real soon.
Absolutely.
And a huge thanks to Jeff Nichols for spending the time to be with us today. Guys, open, honest, candid, not just sharing, but critiquing of not just how he's developed as a coach, but some personal decisions he's made along the way. Really fascinating stuff. I can't thank Jeff enough for spending the time with us today and all he's doing to help drive the profession forward. And as always, guys, please, if you enjoyed the talk, share it through the social media outlet of your choice, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is. Again, if you could screenshot it, put it on your IG story, we'd truly appreciate it. Again, your word of mouth is our oxygen, so any way that you could spread the information that we're putting out here on the show, I would be truly appreciative of. So thank you very much for that. And as always, guys, thank you for everything that you do for us here at Central Virginia Sport Performance. We'll be back next week with another awesome guest. We'll see you then.